Man finds out. His best friend is the veteran he mocked in high school. The San Francisco skyline gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. From the 34th floor of a sleek glass tower, Ryan Edwards gazed out at the city he now called home, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of his mouth. At 35, he had achieved more than most people twice his age: a thriving tech company, a penthouse apartment with a view to die for, and a reputation as one of Silicon Valley's rising stars. But today's triumph eclipsed all others. Ryan turned from the window, his eyes sweeping across the expansive office where a small group of people were gathered, clinking champagne flutes and exchanging congratulations. In the center of it all stood Mark Rivers, Ryan's best friend, and now, officially, his business partner. To Nexus Solutions. Mark raised his glass, his deep voice carrying across the room. May our venture revolutionize the tech industry and make us filthy rich in the process. Laughter rippled through the group as Ryan made his way to Mark's side, clapping him on the shoulder. Don't forget the part about changing the world, Ryan quipped, his grin infectious. We're not just in it for the money, right? Mark rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Of course not. We're noble, selfless entrepreneurs, dedicated solely to the betterment of humanity. Their banter was well-practiced, a dance of words that had evolved over years of friendship. Ryan and Mark had met at a tech conference 4 years ago, two ambitious young men with dreams of creating something revolutionary. Where Ryan was all charisma and rapid-fire ideas, Mark was the steady hand, the voice of reason that kept their shared vision grounded in reality. As the last of the investors filed out, promises of future meetings and partnerships hanging in the air, Ryan flopped onto the sleek leather couch that dominated one corner of the office. I can't believe we actually pulled it off, he said, loosening his tie. Nexus Solutions. It has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Mark settled into an armchair across from him, his posture relaxed but still carrying that hint of military bearing that Ryan had come to associate with his friend. It does, he agreed, and though I still think Annette Rivers Edwards would have sounded more professional. Ryan snorted. Yeah, like we're some stuffy law firm. No thanks. We're disrupting industries here, my friend. We need a name that screams future. Their conversation drifted to the practical matters of their new joint venture. Office space to be allocated, teams to be assembled, projects to be prioritized. As they talked, Ryan couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. From a chance meeting at a crowded conference to this moment, on the cusp of something truly groundbreaking. The sun had dipped low on the horizon when Mark finally stood, stretching. I should head out. Sarah's expecting me for dinner. Ryan nodded, reaching for the remote to turn on the large TV mounted on the wall. Give her my best. Tell her I'm sorry for keeping you late on launch day. As Mark gathered his things, the TV flickered to life, a news anchor's voice filling the room. And in local news, preparations are underway for this weekend's Veterans Appreciation Parade. City officials expect a turnout of over... Ryan's attention drifted back to Mark. Hey, you going to that veterans thing this weekend? Seems like it'd be right up your alley. Mark paused, his hand on the door handle. I hadn't planned on it. Why do you ask? Something in Mark's tone made Ryan glance at him, but his friend's face was unreadable. Ryan shrugged, turning back to the TV. No reason. Just seems like they make such a big deal out of these things, you know? I mean, don't get me wrong, I respect the military and all that. But sometimes it feels a bit, I don't know, overdone. The words left his mouth before he could really think about them, a habit from his younger days that he'd never quite shaken. I saw this thing on Twitter the other day. Some guy complaining about how veterans get all this attention and special treatment, and I kinda get it, you know? It's not like they did anything that important. They're just soldiers, right? No big deal. The silence that followed his words was heavy, charged with something Ryan couldn't quite identify. When he looked back at Mark, he caught a flicker of, was that pain? Disappointment? But it was gone so quickly, replaced by Mark's usual calm expression. that Ryan wondered if he'd imagined it. "I should go," Mark said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll see you tomorrow, Ryan. We've got that meeting with the dev team at 9. Before Ryan could respond, Mark was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Left alone in the suddenly too quiet office, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd said something wrong, crossed some invisible line. But as quickly as the thought came, he dismissed it. He and Mark were best friends, partners. If he'd truly offended Mark, surely his friend would have said something. Shaking off the uneasy feeling, Ryan turned back to the TV, his mind already drifting to the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead for Nexus Solutions. The future was bright, full of possibility. Whatever momentary awkwardness had passed between him and Mark, he was sure it would be forgotten by morning. Little did Ryan know that his casual words had stirred up ghosts from the past, setting in motion a chain of events that would force him to confront long-buried truths and challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, his friend, and the true meaning of heroism. The halls of Westfield High School echoed with the cacophony of teenage life, locker doors slamming, sneakers squeaking on linoleum, and the constant buzz of conversation punctuated by bursts of laughter. Amidst the chaos, Ryan Edwards moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew his place in the world. At 17, he was the undisputed king of Westfield, a position earned through a combination of charm, wit, and an unerring ability to say exactly the right thing to make people laugh, often at someone else's expense. "Yo, Edwards," a voice called out over the din. Ryan turned to see his best friend, Jake, pushing through the crowd. "You ready for Anderson's history test? I swear, if I have to memorize one more date, my brain's gonna explode." Ryan grinned, slinging an arm around Jake's shoulders. "Relax, man. History's easy. Just make up something that sounds plausible and throw in a few big words. Anderson'll eat it up." As they made their way down the hall, Ryan's gaze fell on a solitary figure at the far end, hunched over a tattered notebook. Matt Richards, or Soldier Boy, as Ryan had dubbed him, stood out like a sore thumb in the sea of trendy outfits and carefully styled hair. His clothes were always a size too big, his hair cropped short in a style that seemed more suited to a military barracks than a high school hallway. "Check it out," Ryan nudged Jake, nodding in Matt's direction. "Bet you $10 Soldier Boy's writing love letters to his drill sergeant again." Jake snickered, but there was a hint of discomfort in his eyes. "Come on, man. Leave him alone. He's not bothering anyone." But Ryan was already moving, drawn to Matt like a shark scenting blood in the water. It was too easy, really. Matt never fought back, never reported Ryan to the teachers. He just took it, his eyes downcast, his shoulders hunched, as if trying to make himself invisible. "Hey there, Soldier Boy!" Ryan's voice rang out, causing Matt to flinch visibly. "Planning your great military strategy? Or just daydreaming about polishing boots and doing push-ups?" Matt said nothing, his grip on the notebook tightening until his knuckles turned white. Around them, a small crowd had gathered, anticipating the show that always seemed to follow in Ryan's wake. "Oh, come on," Ryan pressed, reaching for the notebook. "Don't be shy. Share with the class. I'm sure we'd all love to hear about your heroic plans to..." What was it again? "Oh yeah? Serve your country?" The last words were dripping with sarcasm, eliciting titters from the onlookers. For a moment, it seemed like Matt might actually resist. His eyes, usually downcast, flicked up to meet Ryan's, and in them, Ryan saw a flash of something: anger, defiance, hurt, that made him hesitate. But the moment passed, and Matt's gaze dropped once more. "It's nothing," Matt muttered, his voice barely audible. "Just some notes for class." Ryan felt a twinge of something, disappointment, guilt, but he pushed it aside, buoyed by the expectant looks of his audience. "Notes, huh? Well, don't let us stop you from your very important studies. I'm sure all that knowledge will come in handy when you're digging trenches or whatever it is you soldier types do." The bell rang, saving Matt from further torment. As the crowd dispersed, Ryan caught Jake's eye. His friend was frowning, a look of disapproval clear on his face. "What?" Ryan demanded, suddenly defensive. Jake shook his head. "Nothing, man. Just, don't you think you're taking it a bit far? Matt's never done anything to you. Ryan scoffed, but the uneasy feeling in his gut intensified. It's just a joke, Jake. Lighten up. Besides, someone's got to teach Soldier Boy how the real world works. We're doing him a favor, really. But as they headed to class, Ryan couldn't shake the image of Matt's eyes in that brief moment of defiance. It was easier when Matt just took it, when he played the role of the victim so perfectly. This was something different. Something that made Ryan feel off balance in a way he didn't like. The days that followed saw Ryan doubling down on his torment of Matt, as if trying to prove something to himself. Each cutting remark, each public humiliation was a challenge, daring Matt to fight back, to give Ryan a reason to escalate or to back off. But Matt remained steadfastly silent, absorbing each blow with a quiet dignity that only served to fuel Ryan's frustration. It all came to a head at the school assembly. The principal had organized a series of student speeches about future aspirations, and to everyone's surprise, Matt had volunteered to speak. As he took the stage, his uniform pressed and neat, his back straight with a posture that hinted at hours of practice, a hush fell over the auditorium. I know most of you think you know me, Matt began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Or at least, you think you know what I'm about. But there's more to me, more to all of us, than what you see on the surface. Ryan shifted in his seat, an inexplicable sense of dread settling over him. This wasn't the Matt he knew, the easy target who never fought back. This Matt stood tall, his eyes scanning the crowd with a quiet intensity that commanded attention. I want to serve my country, Matt continued. Not because I love war or violence, but because I believe in protecting the freedoms we all enjoy. Because I want to be part of something bigger than myself, to make a difference in the world. A ripple of whispers ran through the audience. Ryan could feel the mood shifting, saw the looks of grudging respect on some faces. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Matt was ruining the narrative, stepping out of the box Ryan had so carefully placed him in. Before he could stop himself, Ryan was on his feet. Oh, come on, he called out, his voice cutting through the respectful silence. Who are you kidding, Soldier Boy? You really think playing Joe is going to make you a hero? The auditorium went deathly quiet. On stage, Matt faltered, his carefully prepared speech forgotten in the face of this unexpected attack. Ryan pressed on, emboldened by the shocked faces around him. Face it, Richards. You're not fooling anyone. You're just a loser looking for a way to feel important. But guess what? Putting on a uniform doesn't make you special. It just makes you cannon fodder. The words hung in the air, harsh and cruel in the stunned silence. Ryan saw the moment they hit home, saw the light in Matt's eyes dim, his shoulders slump. Without another word, Matt turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind a vacuum that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. In the chaos that followed, teachers calling for order, students buzzing with shocked excitement, Ryan sat back down, a sick feeling growing in his stomach. He'd won, hadn't he? He'd put Soldier Boy in his place, maintained his position at the top of the social hierarchy. So why did victory taste so bitter? As the assembly broke up, Ryan caught sight of Matt slipping out a side door, his dreams of serving his country lying in tatters around him. For a moment, Ryan considered following him, saying, "What? Sorry, it was just a joke." But the moment passed, and Ryan let himself be swept along with the crowd, pushing the image of Matt's defeated face to the back of his mind. It was the last time Ryan would see Matt Richards. In the weeks that followed, rumors circulated that Matt had dropped out, unable to face the ridicule that followed him after the assembly. Ryan laughed it off with his friends, but in quiet moments, he found himself wondering what had become of the boy he'd so callously destroyed. As graduation approached and the world of adulthood loomed, Ryan's thoughts turned to college, to future careers and the life that awaited him beyond the walls of Westfield High. Matt Richards became just another fading memory, a footnote in the story of Ryan's youth. Little did he know that their paths would cross again, in a way that would force him to confront the consequences of his actions and the true meaning of heroism. The years that followed high school were a whirlwind for Ryan Edwards. College brought new challenges and opportunities, and he threw himself into the world of business and technology with the same fervor he had once applied to maintaining his social status. By the time he graduated, armed with an MBA and a head full of entrepreneurial dreams, the memory of Matt Richards and that fateful assembly had faded to little more than a vague, occasionally unsettling dream. It was at a bustling tech conference in Silicon Valley, amidst a sea of eager startups and established industry giants, that Ryan's life took an unexpected turn. He was in his element, working the room with his signature charm, when he quite literally bumped into Mark Rivers. "Whoa, sorry about that," Ryan apologized, steadying himself. He looked up to find himself face to face with a man about his age, with close-cropped dark hair and steady brown eyes that seemed to look right through him. "No harm done," the man replied, offering a small smile. "These conference floors are like minefields. I'm Mark, by the way. Mark Rivers." There was something about Mark that immediately intrigued Ryan. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence he exuded, so different from the brash bravado that dominated much of the tech world. Or maybe it was the way he listened, really listened, when Ryan launched into his pitch about the revolutionary AI system he was developing. Whatever it was, that chance encounter sparked a friendship that would change the course of both their lives. Over coffee that turned into dinner, Ryan and Mark discovered a shared vision for the future of technology, a desire to create solutions that would genuinely improve people's lives. "It's not just about making money," Mark said, his eyes alight with passion. "Though that's certainly nice, it's about leaving the world a little better than we found it, you know?" Ryan nodded, feeling a connection he hadn't experienced since his high school days. "Exactly. Everyone here is so focused on the next big app or gadget. But what about technology that actually solves real problems?" As the weeks turned into months, Ryan and Mark's friendship deepened. They became each other's sounding boards, pushing each other to refine their ideas and challenge their assumptions. Where Ryan was all rapid-fire ideas and boundless enthusiasm, Mark provided a steady, grounding influence, tempering Ryan's wilder notions with practical considerations. It was during one of their late-night brainstorming sessions, fueled by too much coffee and the electric energy of possibility, that the idea for Nexus Solutions was born. Ryan paced the floor of his apartment, gesticulating wildly as he spoke. "Think about it, Mark. A platform that integrates AI, blockchain, and IoT to create smart, self-optimizing systems for businesses. We could revolutionize everything from supply chain management to customer service." Mark leaned back in his chair, brow furrowed in thought. "It's ambitious," he said slowly. "Maybe too ambitious, but..." A smile spread across his face. "If anyone could pull it off, it's us." And so Nexus Solutions was born, a dream transformed into reality through countless hours of hard work, late nights, and the occasional heated argument. As their company grew, so did Ryan and Mark's friendship, deepening into a bond that went beyond mere business partnership. They celebrated victories together, from their first major contract to the day they moved into their own office space. They weathered setbacks side by side, picking each other up after failed pitches and technological dead ends. Through it all, Ryan found himself continually amazed by Mark's resilience, his ability to remain calm and focused even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. "How do you do it?" Ryan asked one night as they sat in their fledgling office, surrounded by the debris of their latest coding marathon. "How do you always stay so steady?" Mark was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "I guess you could say I've had some practice," he said finally. "There was a time in my life when staying calm wasn't just helpful. It was necessary for survival." Ryan leaned forward, intrigued. He knew Mark had served in the military. It was evident in his posture, his discipline, the occasional slip into jargon that Ryan didn't quite understand. But Mark rarely spoke about his time in service, and Ryan had never pushed, sensing it was a topic his friend preferred to keep private. "Your time in the military," Ryan ventured. Mark nodded, a shadow passing over his face. "Yeah, it shaped me, in ways I'm still figuring out. taught me a lot about myself, about what really matters in life. Ryan waited, hoping Mark would elaborate, but his friend had already turned back to his computer. The moment passed. It was a pattern Ryan had noticed over the years. Brief glimpses into Mark's past, quickly shuttered before Ryan could probe deeper. As Nexus Solutions grew, so did the demands on their time. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into months, and soon they found themselves at the helm of one of Silicon Valley's most promising startups. Their friendship, forged in the crucible of entrepreneurship, remained a constant, a foundation upon which they built their success. Yet there were moments when Ryan felt a distance between them, an invisible barrier he couldn't quite breach. It was in the way Mark would sometimes fall silent mid-conversation, his eyes taking on a faraway look, or in the reflexive way he'd position himself with his back to the wall in crowded rooms, scanning exits with a vigilance that seemed out of place in their world of boardrooms and tech conferences. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings with potential investors, Ryan decided to broach the subject that had long lingered unspoken between them. They were at their favorite bar, a low-key place that had become their unofficial office for after-hour strategizing. "Mark," Ryan began, turning his beer bottle slowly between his hands. "Can I ask you something? About your time in the military?" Mark looked up, surprise flickering across his face before his usual calm settled back in place. "Sure," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "What do you want to know?" Ryan hesitated, suddenly unsure how to phrase the question that had been nagging at him. "It's just, you never really talk about it. I mean, I know you served, but beyond that..." He trailed off, searching Mark's face for a reaction. Mark was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on some point beyond Ryan's shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, tinged with an emotion Ryan couldn't quite place. "It's not an easy thing to talk about," Mark said. "The military, it changes you. You see things, do things, that stay with you long after you've hung up the uniform." He paused, taking a long sip of his drink. "I'm proud of my service, don't get me wrong, but it's a part of my life that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't been there." Ryan nodded, feeling simultaneously closer to understanding his friend and further away than ever. "I get it," he said, though he knew he didn't. "Not really. I just want you to know, if you ever do want to talk about it, I'm here." Mark's smile was small but genuine. "I appreciate that, Ryan. Really. Maybe someday I'll take you up on it. For now, though." He gestured to the papers spread out before them. "We've got a company to run, don't we?" And just like that, the moment was over. They dove back into work. The conversation about Mark's past filed away like so many other unfinished discussions. But as they talked strategy and crunched numbers, Ryan found his mind wandering. He thought about the man sitting across from him, this friend who had become like a brother. Mark Rivers, with his steady presence and hidden depths. Ryan realized, with a sudden clarity that surprised him, how little he truly knew about Mark's life before they met. The thought was unsettling, a reminder of the vast experiences that had shaped his friend into the man he was today, experiences Ryan could only guess at. As the night wore on and their planning session drew to a close, Ryan made a silent promise to himself. He would be more attentive, more open to the moments when Mark might want to share his past. He would try to understand the parts of his friend that remained hidden, to bridge the invisible gap that sometimes stretched between them. Little did Ryan know that the truth of Mark's past was closer than he could have imagined, and that when it finally came to light, it would shake the foundations of their friendship and force Ryan to confront long-buried ghosts of his own. The crisp mountain air of Lake Tahoe filled Ryan's lungs as he stepped out onto the balcony of the resort. Below him, the sprawling grounds of the corporate retreat center bustled with activity as employees of Nexus Solutions milled about, enjoying the rare opportunity to relax and bond outside the confines of the office. This annual retreat had been Mark's idea, a chance for team building, strategic planning, and a bit of much-needed downtime. Ryan had to admit, as he watched his employees laughing and chatting in the California sunshine, that it was a stroke of genius. There was an energy in the air, a sense of camaraderie that went beyond the usual professional interactions. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Mark's voice came from behind him. Ryan turned to see his friend and business partner leaning against the doorframe, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. "It's not bad," Ryan grinned. "Though I still say we could have gone somewhere with a beach. You know, really treat the team?" Mark chuckled, joining Ryan at the railing. "Maybe next year. For now, I think the mountains are exactly what we all needed. A chance to step back, get some perspective." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the scene below. Ryan couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come, from two guys with a dream to this, a thriving company, a team of brilliant minds working together to change the world. It was more than he'd ever dared to hope for. "You ready for the sharing circle tonight?" Mark asked, breaking into Ryan's reverie. Ryan groaned dramatically. "Don't remind me. Whose idea was that again? Oh wait, let me guess, our illustrious HR director." "Come on, it'll be good for morale," Mark nudged him playfully. "Besides, I hear Sarah's got some pretty interesting icebreaker games planned." The sharing circle, as it had been dubbed, was the centerpiece of the retreat, a chance for employees to share personal stories and experiences that had shaped their lives. The idea was to foster deeper connections and understanding among the team. Ryan had to admit, it was a good concept, even if the thought of opening up in front of his employees made him slightly uncomfortable. As the day wore on, Ryan found himself actually looking forward to the evening's activities. There was something infectious about the mood of the retreat, a openness and warmth that made even the most reserved members of the team seem more approachable. That evening kicked things off with a few light-hearted icebreaker games that had everyone laughing and relaxed. Then, as the energy in the room settled into something more contemplative, she introduced the main event. "Tonight is about connecting on a deeper level," Sarah explained, her voice warm and encouraging. "We spend so much time together at work, but how often do we really get to know the person behind the job title? So I'm inviting each of you to share a story, a moment from your life that shaped who you are today." Ryan listened with growing admiration as his employees opened up. There were stories of triumph over adversity, of life-changing decisions, of small moments that had led to big revelations. Each tale offered a new perspective on people he thought he knew well, revealing hidden depths and unexpected strengths. When it was his turn, Ryan surprised himself with his candor. He spoke about his early days as an entrepreneur, the doubts and fears he'd faced, and how meeting Mark had changed the trajectory of his life and career. As he spoke, he caught Mark's eye across the circle. His friend's expression was one of quiet pride and affection, and Ryan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Finally, it was Mark's turn. Ryan leaned forward, curious. Despite their years of friendship, Mark had always been somewhat guarded about his past. This, Ryan realized, might be his chance to finally understand the experiences that had shaped his friend and partner. Mark cleared his throat, his usual confidence seeming to waver for a moment. I've never really talked about this in a professional setting," he began, his voice low but steady. "But I think it's important, especially given the work we do at Nexus, to understand where we all come from." The room fell silent, all eyes on Mark. Ryan felt a sudden tension in the air, as if everyone sensed they were about to hear something significant. "Before I met Ryan, before I even thought about entering the tech world, I served in the military," Mark continued. "It wasn't an easy decision to enlist. In fact, for a long time, it seemed like an impossible dream." As Mark spoke, painting a vivid picture of a young man driven by a desire to serve his country despite overwhelming odds, Ryan felt a growing sense of unease. There was something familiar about this story, something that tugged at the edges of his memory. "I was never the popular kid in school," Mark was saying, a rueful smile playing at his lips. "I was quiet, awkward, an easy target for people who didn't understand or respect my dreams." Ryan's heart began to race. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. And yet, there was this one guy, Mark continued, his voice taking on a hint of old pain. The king of the school, you could say. He made it his mission to torment me, to ridicule my plans to join the military, called me soldier boy, made fun of everything from my clothes to my haircut. The blood drained from Ryan's face as the realization hit him like a physical blow. Mark Rivers, his best friend and business partner, the man he'd come to respect and admire more than anyone in the world, was Matt Richards. The same Matt Richards he had mercilessly bullied in high school, the boy whose dreams he had mocked, whose spirit he had tried so hard to break. It all came to a head at a school assembly, Mark was saying, but Ryan could barely hear him over the roaring in his ears. I had volunteered to give a speech about my plans to enlist. I thought maybe if I could explain why it was so important to me, people would understand. But Ryan wanted to stand up, to run from the room, to wake up from what surely must be a nightmare, but he was frozen in place, forced to confront the consequences of his past actions in the most public and painful way possible. Someone stood up in the middle of my speech, Mark continued, his eyes distant with the memory. Called me out in front of the whole school, said I was just a loser looking for a way to feel important, that putting on a uniform wouldn't make me special, just, what was it? Oh yeah, cannon fodder. A collective gasp went through the room. Ryan felt the weight of his colleagues' stares, though he couldn't tear his eyes away from Mark. Did Mark know? Had he known all along who Ryan really was? I'd love to say I stood my ground, that I finished my speech and walked out with my head held high, Mark said, a sad smile playing at his lips. But the truth is, I ran. I left that assembly feeling lower than I ever had in my life. For a while, I even thought about giving up on my dream of enlisting. Ryan's mind raced, trying to reconcile the cruel, thoughtless boy he had been with the man he was now. How could he have done that to Matt, to Mark? How could he have been so blind to the pain he was causing? But you know what? Mark's voice took on a note of triumph. That moment, as horrible as it was, became the fuel that drove me forward. I enlisted as soon as I graduated, and every time things got tough in basic training, every time I wanted to quit, I remembered that assembly. I remembered the voice of that bully telling me I'd never amount to anything, and I pushed harder. As Mark continued his story, detailing his rise through the ranks, the challenges he faced, and the lessons he learned, Ryan sat in stunned silence. He barely registered the words, too consumed by the storm of emotions raging within him. Guilt, shame, regret. They crashed over him in waves, threatening to drown him. When Mark finally finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People wiped away tears, moved by the story of perseverance and triumph over adversity. But Ryan couldn't join in. He sat, frozen, as the full weight of his past actions settled over him like a shroud. As the sharing circle broke up and people began to mingle, Ryan remained rooted to his seat. He watched as Mark was surrounded by colleagues offering words of admiration and support. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, Ryan saw something in Mark's gaze that shook him to his core. Recognition. Mark knew. He had always known. And yet, he had chosen to become Ryan's friend, his partner. The realization was too much to bear. Without a word, Ryan stood and fled the room, leaving behind a legacy of pain he had long forgotten, and a friend whose capacity for forgiveness he was only now beginning to understand. The cool night air hit Ryan like a physical force as he burst out of the conference center, gulping in deep breaths as if he'd been drowning. His mind reeled, unable to process the revelation that had just shattered his world. Mark Rivers, his best friend, his business partner, the man he trusted more than anyone in the world, was Matt Richards, the boy he had tormented mercilessly in high school. Ryan stumbled to a nearby bench, collapsing onto it as his legs threatened to give way beneath him. The serene beauty of the moonlit lake before him seemed to mock the turmoil raging in his heart. How had he not seen it? How had he not recognized Mark as the boy he had so cruelly bullied? As the initial shock began to subside, a tidal wave of memories crashed over Ryan. He saw Matt, no, Mark, hunched over his notebook in the school hallway, flinching at every barbed comment. He heard his own voice, younger and full of casual cruelty, taunting "soldier boy" about his dreams of enlisting. And worst of all, he relived that fateful assembly where he had stood up and publicly humiliated Mark in front of the entire school. The guilt was overwhelming, a physical ache that seemed to consume him from the inside out. Ryan buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. How could he have been so blind, so thoughtless? And how, in all the years of their friendship, had Mark never said anything? As the night wore on, Ryan remained on that bench, lost in a spiral of self-recrimination and regret. He thought about all the times Mark had shown him kindness, all the moments of support and encouragement. Had Mark been laughing at him all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth and exact his revenge? But even as the thought formed, Ryan knew it wasn't true. Mark, the Mark he knew now, wasn't capable of such calculated cruelty. If anything, Mark had been the one to teach Ryan about true strength, about resilience in the face of adversity. The irony of it was almost too much to bear. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Ryan made a decision. He couldn't run from this. He owed it to Mark, and to himself, to face the truth head-on. With heavy steps, he made his way back to his room, his mind racing with how to approach the inevitable conversation. The retreat center was quiet, most participants still asleep after the emotional evening. Ryan showered and changed, going through the motions mechanically as he rehearsed what he might say to Mark. Every potential opening line seemed inadequate, every apology hollow in the face of the pain he had caused. As he stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie with trembling hands, Ryan barely recognized the man staring back at him. He had always prided himself on his success, on the empire he and Mark had built together. But now, all of that seemed meaningless. What good was professional achievement if he couldn't even face the consequences of his past actions? A soft knock on the door jolted Ryan from his reverie. His heart raced as he crossed the room, knowing instinctively who would be on the other side. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door to find Mark standing there, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," Mark said simply. Ryan nodded, stepping aside to let his friend, was he still his friend, enter. The silence between them was heavy, charged with unspoken words and years of buried history. "Mark, Ryan began, but Mark held up a hand, silencing him. "Not here," Mark said, his voice low but firm. "Let's take a walk. I think we both could use some fresh air." They made their way out of the retreat center in silence, following a path that wound around the lake. The morning was crisp and clear, the world around them slowly coming to life. In any other circumstance, it would have been beautiful. Now, it felt like the calm before a storm. They had walked for nearly 10 minutes before Mark finally spoke. "You know, I recognized you the moment we met at that tech conference," he said, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. "I almost walked away then and there." Ryan felt his stomach drop. "Why didn't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "Because I saw something in your eyes that day," he said finally. "Something different from the boy I knew in high school. There was passion there, yes, but also, I don't know, a hunger to prove yourself, to do something meaningful." They came to a small clearing overlooking the lake. Mark stopped, turning to face Ryan for the first time since they'd left the retreat center. "I decided to give you a chance," he said, "to see if the man you'd become was different from the boy who had tormented me." Ryan felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. "Mark, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry seems so inadequate. What I did to you, it was cruel. It was thoughtless. I was a different person then, but that's no excuse. You're right." Mark cut him off, his voice sharp. "It's not an excuse. Do you have any idea how much damage you did? How close I came to giving up on my dreams because of your words?" The pain in Mark's voice was like a physical blow. Ryan felt himself shrinking under the weight of it, years of guilt and shame crashing down on him all at once. I can't even imagine, he said softly. Mark, if I could take it all back. But you can't, Mark said, his tone softening slightly. What's done is done. The question is, what do we do now? Ryan looked up, surprised. We? He echoed. You mean, you're not ending our partnership? Our friendship? Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it, he admitted. When I saw your face last night, when I realized you had finally figured it out, part of me wanted to walk away and never look back. Ryan nodded, bracing himself for the worst, but Mark wasn't finished. But then I thought about the last few years, he continued, about the man I've come to know, the friend who stood by me through thick and thin, and I realized something important. What's that? Ryan asked, hardly daring to hope. Mark's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of pain and something else, understanding, perhaps even forgiveness. I realized that the boy who bullied me in high school and the man standing before me now are two very different people, just as I'm not the same scared, insecure kid I was back then. Relief washed over Ryan, so powerful it made him dizzy, but it was quickly followed by a renewed sense of shame. You're a better man than I am, Mark, he said quietly. After everything I did, I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not, Mark agreed. But forgiveness isn't about what we deserve. It's about choosing to move forward, to break the cycle of hurt and resentment. They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Where do we go from here? He asked. Mark turned to look out over the lake, the rising sun casting a golden glow across the water. That's up to you, he said. I've made my peace with the past. I've built a life I'm proud of, a career that fulfills me. The question is, what are you going to do with this second chance? Ryan felt something shift inside him, a determination taking root where guilt and shame had resided. I want to make things right, he said firmly. Not just with you, but with anyone else I might have hurt back then. I want to be better, to do better. A small smile played at the corners of Mark's mouth. That's a good start, he said, but words are easy. Ryan, it's actions that count. Ryan nodded, understanding the challenge in Mark's words. I know, he said, and I'm ready to put in the work, whatever it takes. As they began the walk back to the retreat center, a new understanding blossoming between them, Ryan felt a mixture of emotions he couldn't quite name. There was still guilt, yes, and a deep sense of regret for the pain he had caused. But there was also hope. Hope for redemption, for the chance to become the kind of man who truly deserved Mark's friendship and forgiveness. The path ahead would not be easy. Ryan knew there would be difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and the hard work of genuine change. But as he walked beside Mark, the man he had once tormented and who had somehow found it in his heart to give him a second chance, Ryan felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the path before them. It was a new day, full of possibility and the promise of growth. And for Ryan Edwards, it was the first step on a journey of redemption he never knew he needed to take. The remainder of the corporate retreat passed in a blur for Ryan. He went through the motions, participating in team-building exercises and strategy sessions, but his mind was elsewhere. Every time he caught Mark's eye across a room, he felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over him. The weight of their shared history, now fully revealed, seemed to hang in the air between them, invisible to others but palpable to Ryan. As the retreat drew to a close and the Nexus Solutions team prepared to return to San Francisco, Ryan knew he couldn't let things end like this. The conversation by the lake had been a start, but there was still so much left unsaid, so many wounds that needed to be addressed. On the last evening, as people packed and said their goodbyes, Ryan found himself standing outside Mark's door, his heart pounding. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. What right did he have to ask for more of Mark's time, more of his emotional energy? Hadn't he taken enough already? Before he could talk himself out of it, the door swung open. Mark stood there, a look of surprise quickly replaced by understanding as he saw Ryan's conflicted expression. "I was hoping we could talk," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Really talk? About everything?" Mark nodded, stepping aside to let Ryan enter. The room was neat, Mark's suitcase already packed and waiting by the door. Ryan took a seat in the armchair by the window, while Mark settled on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken truths and buried emotions. Finally, Ryan took a deep breath and began. "I've been trying to find the right words," he said, his voice shaky. "To explain, to apologize. But everything I come up with feels inadequate. How do you apologize for years of torment, for almost crushing someone's dreams?" Mark's expression was unreadable as he listened. When Ryan fell silent, he leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "You're right," he said softly. "There aren't words big enough for that kind of apology, but I think I understand why you're trying." Ryan looked up, surprised. "You do?" Mark nodded. "The Ryan I've known these past few years, my friend, my business partner, he's a man who cares deeply about doing the right thing, who wants to make a positive impact on the world. That man is having a hard time reconciling himself with the boy who bullied me in high school." The accuracy of Mark's assessment hit Ryan like a physical blow. "How can you know me so well," he asked, "when I'm only just starting to understand myself?" A small smile played at the corners of Mark's mouth. "Maybe because I've had years to observe you, to see the man you've become, without the baggage of our shared past clouding my judgment." Ryan shook his head, still struggling to comprehend Mark's capacity for understanding. "But how can you even stand to be around me, after everything I did?" "It wasn't easy at first," Mark admitted. "When we first met at that conference, a part of me wanted to confront you right then and there, to make you face what you'd done. But I saw something in you that day, a spark of the man you could become, and I made a choice to give you a chance." "Why?" Ryan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mark was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "Because holding on to that anger, that pain, it was only hurting me. The boy who bullied me in high school couldn't be touched by my resentment, but I could give the man you are now a chance to be better." Ryan felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said. "Maybe not," Mark agreed. "But forgiveness isn't about what we deserve. It's a gift we give ourselves as much as the other person. It's about choosing to move forward instead of being trapped in the past." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of Mark's words settling over them. Finally, Ryan spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to make things right," he said. "Not just with you, but with anyone else I might have hurt back then. I want to be better, to do better, but I don't know how." Mark leaned back, regarding Ryan thoughtfully. "It's not going to be easy," he said. "Real change never is, but I think the fact that you want to try is a good start." "Will you help me?" Ryan asked, hating how vulnerable he sounded, but knowing he needed to be honest. "I know I have no right to ask, but I don't think I can do this alone." For the first time that evening, a genuine smile spread across Mark's face. "Well, that's what friends are for," he said simply. The tension that had been building in Ryan's chest began to ease. He hadn't been granted absolution. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. But he had been given something perhaps even more valuable, a chance to earn redemption. As they continued to talk late into the night, Ryan felt something shift inside him. The guilt and shame were still there, but alongside them now was a determination to become the kind of man who truly deserved Mark's friendship and forgiveness. When they finally said goodnight, the first light of dawn was beginning to paint the sky. Ryan returned to his room, exhausted but with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He had a lot of work to do, a lot of amends to make, But for the first time since the revelation of Mark's true identity, he felt hope. As he packed his bags, preparing to return to San Francisco and the life he had built, Ryan made a silent vow. He would become a man worthy of the second chance he had been given. He would use his resources, his influence, to make a positive difference in the world. And he would never again take for granted the power of words or the impact they could have on a person's life. The sun rose over Lake Tahoe, casting long shadows across the retreat center. For Ryan Edwards, it was the dawn of a new chapter, one of redemption, growth, and the hard work of becoming a better man. The weeks following the corporate retreat were a whirlwind of activity for Ryan Edwards. On the surface, life at Nexus Solutions continued as usual. Meetings were held, projects were launched, and the day-to-day bustle of running a successful tech company hummed along. But beneath the familiar routines, a profound change was taking place. Ryan threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, but his focus had shifted. Where once he had been driven primarily by the desire for success and recognition, he now found himself constantly asking a different question. How can we use our technology to make a real, positive difference in people's lives? This new perspective led to some raised eyebrows in board meetings. When Ryan suggested allocating a significant portion of their resources to developing affordable AI-driven prosthetics for veterans, some of the investors were skeptical. But Mark stood firmly by his side, lending his support and expertise to the project. It's not just about making money, Ryan argued passionately during one particularly heated meeting. It's about using our skills, our resources, to improve lives, to give back to those who have sacrificed so much. As he spoke, Ryan caught Mark's eye across the conference table. There was a glimmer of pride in his friend's gaze, a silent acknowledgement of how far Ryan had come. It fueled him, pushing him to work harder, to be better. But Ryan's journey of redemption extended beyond the walls of Nexus Solutions. True to his word, he began reaching out to people from his past, former classmates he had bullied, teachers he had disrespected, anyone he could remember wronging during his youth. Some of these conversations were awkward, others downright painful. Not everyone was as forgiving as Mark had been. There were angry words, tears, and in some cases, a flat refusal to engage. But Ryan pressed on, driven by a need to confront his past actions and make amends wherever possible. One Saturday morning, Ryan found himself standing outside a small auto repair shop on the outskirts of San Francisco. The sign above the door read, "Richards Repairs." And Ryan's heart raced as he pushed open the door, a bell jingling softly to announce his arrival. The man who emerged from the back of the shop was older than Ryan remembered, his hair graying at the temples, but there was no mistaking those kind eyes. Mr. Richards, Matt's, now Mark's, father, wiped his hands on a rag as he approached the counter. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Ryan swallowed hard, gathering his courage. "Mr. Richards," he began, "you probably don't remember me, but I'm Ryan Edwards. I went to school with your son." Recognition flickered in the older man's eyes, followed quickly by a guarded expression. "I remember you," he said quietly. "You're the boy who made my son's life hell." The blunt assessment hit Ryan like a physical blow, but he nodded, accepting the truth of it. "Yes, sir," he said. "That's why I'm here. I wanted to apologize, not just to Mark, Matt, but to you as well. I know the pain I caused didn't stop with him." Mr. Richards regarded Ryan silently for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he gestured to a pair of chairs in the corner of the shop. "Sit down." As on down, he said, "I think we have a lot to talk about." For the next hour, Ryan poured out his heart to Mr. Richards. He spoke of his regret, of the journey he had been on since reconnecting with Mark, of his desire to make amends and become a better person. Mr. Richards listened quietly, occasionally asking a question or offering a comment. As Ryan's words finally ran dry, Mr. Richards leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said slowly, "when Matt, Mark, told me he was going into business with you. I thought he was crazy. I couldn't understand how he could forgive you after everything that happened." Ryan nodded, understanding all too well the disbelief Mr. Richards must have felt. "I couldn't understand it either," he admitted. "I still can't, some days." Mr. Richards was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands clasped in his lap. But you know what?" he finally said, his voice softer now. "Seeing you here today, hearing what you've said, I'm starting to understand. My son saw something in you worth believing in, and I think I'm beginning to see it too." The words hit Ryan with unexpected force, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you, sir," he managed. That means more than you know." As Ryan left the shop that day, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not quite, but it was a step in the right direction. A bridge being rebuilt, slowly but surely. In the months that followed, Ryan's commitment to change manifested in various ways. He volunteered at local veterans organizations, gaining a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by those who had served. He spoke at high schools about the long-term consequences of bullying, sharing his own story as a cautionary tale and a message of hope for redemption. At Nexus Solutions, the Veterans Prosthetics Project became a cornerstone of their work. Ryan and Mark poured countless hours into its development, collaborating with medical professionals and veterans to create technology that was not just cutting-edge, but truly life-changing. One crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after the fateful corporate retreat, Ryan found himself standing before a crowd at the San Francisco VA Medical Center. Beside him stood Mark, looking sharp in a suit that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. They were there to unveil the first line of Nexus AI-enhanced prosthetics, developed specifically for veterans. As Ryan stepped up to the microphone, he felt a momentary flutter of nerves. Public speaking had never fazed him before. But this was different. This wasn't about impressing investors or wowing the tech world. This was about making a real difference in people's lives. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I stand before you today not just as the CEO of Nexus Solutions, but as a man on a journey of redemption." A hush fell over the crowd as Ryan shared his story, the tale of a bully who had nearly crushed a young man's dreams, and how that same young man had given him a second chance years later. He spoke of the power of words to hurt and to heal, of the importance of facing one's past mistakes and striving to be better. "The technology we're unveiling today," Ryan continued, gesturing to the sleek prosthetic arm on display beside him, "is more than just a product. It's a promise. A promise to those who have sacrificed so much for our country that we see you, we value you, and we are committed to supporting you in every way we can." As he spoke, Ryan's eyes found Mark in the crowd. His friend and partner stood tall, a quiet pride evident in his bearing. Beside him was Mr. Richards, who had flown in for the event at Ryan's invitation. The older man's eyes were misty, his hand resting on Mark's shoulder in a gesture of fatherly support. When the presentation ended and the first group of veterans came forward to be fitted with their new prosthetics, Ryan stepped back, content to let the medical team take the lead. He watched as faces lit up with wonder and joy, as people who had struggled with basic tasks suddenly found new capabilities at their fingertips. "You did good, kid," a gruff voice said beside him. Ryan turned to find Mr. Richards standing there, his eyes fixed on the scene before them. "We did good," Ryan corrected gently. "None of this would have been possible without Mark's vision and your son's forgiveness." Mr. Richards nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You know," he said, "when Mark, was a boy, all he ever talked about was serving his country, making a difference. I never imagined it would look like this, but..." He gestured to the veterans trying out their new prosthetics, to Mark chatting animatedly with a group of them. "I'd say he's fulfilled that dream and then some." Ryan felt a warmth spread through his chest, a sense of purpose and rightness that he had never experienced in all his years of chasing success. "He's my hero," he said softly, "in more ways than he'll ever know." As the event wound down and people began to filter out, Ryan found a quiet moment with Mark. They stood side by side, watching as the last of the veterans left, many with new prosthetics that would change their lives. "Thank you," Ryan said simply, turning to face his friend. Mark raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For believing in me," Ryan replied. "For giving me a chance to become someone better than I was. For everything." "Really?" Mark was quiet for a moment, his eyes scanning Ryan's face as if searching for something. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "You know," Mark said, "when I was in the military, I learned something important about heroism. It's not about big, dramatic gestures or single acts of bravery. Real heroism is about showing up every day, doing the right thing even when it's hard, and being willing to face your own flaws and mistakes." He clasped Ryan's shoulder, his grip firm and warm. "By that definition, my friend, I'd say you've become quite the hero yourself." The words hit Ryan with unexpected force, bringing a sting of tears to his eyes. He blinked them back, too overwhelmed to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "I'm still learning," he said. "Still trying to be better, but I promise you, Mark, I won't let you down. Not again." As they left the medical center that day, stepping out into the bright California sunshine, Ryan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The guilt and shame that had plagued him for so long hadn't disappeared entirely. Perhaps they never would. But alongside them now was a sense of purpose, a commitment to continue on this path of growth and redemption. The boy who had once used his words as weapons had become a man determined to use them, and every other resource at his disposal, to heal and to help. It wasn't a Hollywood ending, with all wrongs magically righted and all wounds perfectly healed. It was something better, a new beginning, a chance to write a different story. As Ryan and Mark walked side by side, discussing plans for the future of Nexus Solutions and their ongoing work with veterans, the past no longer loomed as a shadow over them. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far they had come and the incredible journey still ahead. The story of the bully and the bullied had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined in their high school days, a tale of friendship, forgiveness, and the enduring power of second chances. And for Ryan Edwards, it was just the beginning of a lifelong commitment to using his words, his actions, and his influence to make the world a little bit better, one day at a time.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.